start recording. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this evening's listening session. You all had better places to be, but I'm so glad that you're spending time with us and the residents and the representatives in our communities in Trenton and Mercer County vicinity. So thank you very much. A very special thank you to one of our hosts, Pastor Karen Hernandez-Granzen from Westminster Presbyterian Church in Trenton. Thank you so much for being with us on the evenings of the listening session. It is through shared vision with myself from Clean Water Action and Fred Stein from the Delaware Riverkeeper Network and Pastor Karen that we wanted to hear what it all was that the residents had to say in the city of Trenton. And in particular, we have Kendra McCoy with us from the Watershed Institute. This is a beautiful partnership that we all have with one another because Kendra and the Watershed Institute are doing work in the community of Trenton and Mercer County as well. And Kendra is actually a very near neighbor to me in the Hamilton section. So I'm really excited about that. And so just to give you all a little bit of what we're doing. My name is Aubrey Molinetto. I am the Water Justice Organizer for the City of Trenton. And as we may or may not know, we have the beautiful Assapean Creek in our vicinity. And we have upstream, it goes as far as Allentown, right, Fred?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. And West Windsor in that area. And Trenton sits at the basin. So we've had a grant, we're working with a grant funded by the William Penn Foundation that discusses and teaches our residents and leadership on the upstream and downstream effects along the Assapean Creek. And essentially what that is whatever, just make it very simple, right? Is whatever happens upstream comes downstream. And it affects us in the city of Trenton. And we have some negative impacts, such as flooding, pollution in the waters. And so this evening's listening session is to hear what are some of the concerns that the residents have. Fred, working with the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, he is he's an expert on the Delaware River and also the Assapean Creek watershed. So we'll be hearing from him if we have any questions regarding any of the watershed issues that we may have or that we have concern for. And Kendra, if Kendra can answer to that, she will speak to that as well. At some point, I'm not sure, let me see who all is on here with us. We will be having from the DEP, Nicole Alexander and Kathleen Bell. I'm trying to see if they will be showing themselves up this evening. They had a big interest in working with us and trying to listen in and also hear what it is that we were, some of the concerns that the residents had. And if they could speak to anything that we have concerns about, they will do that as well. And so I have here, let me see who all's in attendance. I have Kathleen. Kathleen is with DEP. Kathleen, you want to say something? I don't see you, darling. Are you there? Okay. If everybody could just take themselves, okay, give me 1 second, Kathleen. I do apologize. Let me get you unmuted over here.
Aubrey, I think everyone's, yeah, there you go. You got
okay, there we go. Okay. Okay, and we got some more people coming in.
Hi, Aubrey. I just wanted to say hi, Kathleen Bell. I'm actually with US EPA Region 2. So we serve New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and the 8 tribal nations in New York. But very interested in just listening into your concerns tonight and seeing, if there's anything EPA can take back and help out with.
We thank you very much for participating, Kathleen, and I'm sorry you were muted.
No worries. Thank you for having us, Nate.
Okay, thank you. It's the funniest thing because when I'm running these programs, I'm also the tech person. So I'm I'm learning how to navigate this area as well. We have some representatives from the Westminster Presbyterian Church as well. So we're going to start, and we wanted to acknowledge them. If everyone could just put yourselves on camera so that we can see your beautiful faces. And I'm going to start picking some folks. I have Edward Burdens here. Edward, how are you, Edward? Can you hear me? Hi, Sun Young. Okay, so who would like to start with some of the concerns that they have in the city of Trenton, environmental concerns or any concerns regarding maybe illegal dumping, maybe some concerns about the water? What do we have to say? Hi, Liam.
I could get us started. I recently was celebrating the 80th birthday of a member of Westminster that lives in Hamilton. And we went out to eat in a local restaurant in Hamilton. And she asked if they had bottled water because she won't drink the water that is purchased from Trenton.
Oh, wow.
And it was shocking to me. But she said, I have not been drinking the water for a while now.
Yeah, so we have a lot of concerns regarding the water issues with the Trenton Waterworks, right? And there's Trenton Waterworks deals with many of the municipalities in the Mercer County area. And so there have been in Hamilton in particular as well, some concerns regarding that. From my understanding, both mayors are working together to try to navigate this and to try to really deal with Sun Young said, yes, Trenton Waterworks and lead pipes. Yeah, they had a lead pipe programming where they were asking those that had lead pipes in their homes to change them out for the copper pipes. So what in particular would you like for Trenton Waterworks to address? Because moving forward, then this would be something that we would bring to Trenton Waterworks to see if maybe we can have a forum where they can speak to us, speak to the people, or give us more insight as to exactly what's happening. How do you think we should deal with this?
Two things. One is that obviously the filtration system has to be up to par so that the water is being pure, is clean enough to drink. But also what I learned is when the change in administration, back when Christie became the governor, I learned today that the waterworks personnel was reduced by 40 people. So if there needs to be a reallocation of funding so that there's more than enough staff to make sure that the process that it takes to filter the water happens, I think that's important.
Absolutely. And I'm taking notes down because part of this listening session, the purpose of the listening session is to help develop programming so that we can further help our residents advocate for the things that they need in their communities. We've already done some kind of programming regarding OBRA requests, looking at the municipal stormwater management system, and try to find out where it is that the city is not being accountable and how we can work with them to bring notice to areas that are not functioning well, maybe. And also the mapping and the DEP, some of the concerns that we may have had regarding contamination and how DEP plays a role into that. So moving along now, we're getting into water, right? So I would like to solicit the support of the city to see if they could come on a webinar and talk to us about the waterworks and what's happening. Because we don't want to be the middleman in the sense of meeting both ends against the middle, but we do want to help bridge the gap. And we feel like, and this is part of our grant programming too, in communities of color, especially where there's a high population of Latino people, we don't always get the information that we need. And sometimes the same people are the ones that are going to the meetings and they're not necessarily bringing that information back. We're grateful for people like Pastor Karen because she notifies her congregation of what's going on in the city, and she stands on just about every front to represent the people in the city of Trenton, and we're grateful for that. But when we're dealing with like these webinars, a lot of people are not showing up. A lot of people are not really getting the information that they need so that they can really learn how to advocate for themselves, and sometimes don't know who it is that they need to go to get the information that they need, because there's so many different layers. It's kind of like peeling back the onion, right? So Fred and I, we're going to speak with our Brownfield coordinator and also see if we can speak with a representative from the Water Works Department so that we can figure out what are the issues that the community has, and maybe they could speak to it better than we can speak to it, because they're the ones that are doing it. So I've taken my notes. Fred, did you want to add anything to that?
The only, what I would, I do think that's a good idea. I know that to hear from what the what the contamination levels that are allowed to be in the drinking water, and those are changing. They're becoming. I have two kids that live in Metuchen, and in Metuchen, all of a sudden, people couldn't drink the water coming from the tap because of the chemical PFOA. It's contaminated the groundwater, and that hasn't increased. It's just that the standards have been reduced. So now, because the science is better, we recognize that it should be reduced. And so up in Metuchen, they're building a new sewer treatment plant or a water purification plant that will manage that contaminant and other contaminants, so people can then go back to drinking their water. So what would be good is to have more maybe real-time monitoring happening at the waterworks, the Trenton Waterworks, and where that information is available online, so people can see what the water quality levels are, on a real-time basis, like instantly.
Mm-hmm.
So if that information is done on a weekly basis or something, that information is available. You don't have to wait for a quarterly newsletter or an annual newsletter from the town.
That's good, Fred. That's a good recommendation. And that's a great segue into the question. Can Kathleen speak to what contamination levels that are allowed in towns like Trenton? So Kathleen?
Unfortunately, I don't know what those levels are, but I can work on finding that out information out for you, and I can share it with you so that you can distribute it to everyone.
I appreciate that. So when Kathleen gets me that information, everyone that is signed up for this webinar will get that information sent after the webinar, okay?
Aubrey, can I please go back to what Fred said?
Yes,
I think that's a really great suggestion. I would imagine that Trenton might push back on having that much accountability, but I think that's the right thing, because then they've got to have their A game all the time. So it brings out the best in people when you raise the bar and hold them
absolutely.
accountable.
Pastor Karen, I agree. I think that that is an excellent idea. And, you know, given the fact that we are still in this pandemic and not many people still don't feel that comfortable going out and participating in things, having that information available online is a great idea. Kendra, would you like to speak to anything of that? Because you're affected by this water as well. You're in Hamilton.
Yeah, so it's something that I'm personally invested in and professionally invested. And it's, how do I put it? It's difficult for me personally. The burden of like having to bottle water or having to take the mental load to call and look into this. I have the bandwidth and the time to do this. What really aggravates me is this impacts communities where so many people are just focused on survival and focused on trying to help their children or whoever's part of their next generation get farther ahead, that they don't have the bandwidth to focus on these things. So why this work in this listening session is so important is because people like myself, Fred, Aubrey, and with Pastor Karen's help, we can't do this work without the real information from how residents and locals feel. And as much as I want to help, I'm not a resident of Trenton. And many of these places can look at it like, well, Kendra's saying this, she cares about this, but she also works for the Watershed Institute. It needs to feel like the average citizen is passionate and aware about these issues.
Kendra, I really appreciate you saying that, because it is a personal, but then it's professional as well, right? And then there are those limitations. And what we all strive to do, and which is a big part of our collaboration with one another, is try to not have to keep replicating things, right? Sit in and get in where we could fit in so that we could lend our expertise and lend our support to one another in the fight, and also to our residents, right, that we're trying to be accountable for. One thing I always say, and you both know this of me, there has to be love in our community, right? Because love breeds accountability, it breeds responsibility, and it breeds us working together, right? Because it takes a village. That's the old African proverb. It takes a village, not just to raise a child, but to get things done in our communities. And whereas I may be able to do community organizing, and Kendra has more in-depth knowledge on a different level, and Fred is an expert on a whole other level, all of our areas combined, and Pastor Karen with her expertise and her spiritual responsibility to the people that are in these communities, all of our efforts combined will help to bring about awareness and will help to encourage those that are afraid to speak up for themselves and teach them how to speak up for themselves, and then also try to bring the powers to be to a level of accountability to our communities, right? Because when we're finished with this, when the visitors leave, love has to remain, right? And that brings about the healing in our communities. And it shows equity. It gives us equity. It helps us to deal with one another on an equal level, so that everybody is getting this information. Each one, not only teach one, but each one help to bring this information to their neighbors, to their counterparts within the community. So that's very, very important. May I suggest that the four of us get together and that we construct a letter to the city from each standpoint, right?
Mhm.
And then bring about, see what generates from there. So then we'll do that offline, right? But if we could commit to doing that, then we'll construct a nice letter for the city and let them know we're all working hand in hand with one another, and we're trying to help our residents get a better understanding of what's going on within the waterworks, and get the information out into our communities, especially into our Latina communities and our communities of color. That sounds good? Okay, Fred, can you make a notation of that, please, so that we can move forward with that? I'm gonna look in the chat line and see what Soon Young says, we have a valuable resource called the Delaware River Watershed, and special care is needed to ensure that we don't contaminate the watershed, which can also contaminate groundwater. She says, one concern we have is around flooding and water-related disasters in the region, given climate change forecasts, and how do we prevent our water supplies protected from contamination? Climate adaptation and readiness is a concern. That is very, very good, Sunyi. So this is a great segue for me to let everyone know that in June, Ms. Kendra McCoy is going to be doing a webinar with us on climate change, right?
Yeah, I was, I can't say excited to see someone's concerned about it, but no, I'm excited because it means that people are aware.
Right.
Yeah. And you're right to have concerns. Climate change, New Jersey's in a unique location, both geographically and politically, and from an infrastructure point that makes us vulnerable to a lot of climate change impacts, including sea level rise, urban heat island effect. So something that we have to do as a state is we can no longer be looking at our older 100-year average or predictions for flooding and storms. That actually, if we build to those specifications, we are not going to build to the climate that we're going to have in 20, 50, 100 years. So we're going into that future where we have to use models and predictions in our observations to see where the trajectory is. And a large part of that is local government is going to need to be on board about that. And when they're not on board or aware of the issue, we need local residents to be making noise about that. I'll drop in the chat once I get a second. There's actually resources for municipalities on climate change adaptation and mitigation. They have a toolkit. So sometimes they're not aware, but this is also part of us listening to residents and trying to take that feedback. So the more noise you can make about this issue, or if other people in the chat share the same or similar concerns, please let us know.
Thank you very much, Kendra, for that. And I will add to this that we are also working to do canvas, to get some canvassers to go to learn how to canvas in their community, and to also then go around canvassing to bring about awareness of the Assapequa Creek and how to maintain it, and just, practical ideas, right, on how to, what the resident can do to keep the Assapequa Creek from being contaminated. That's one. The other thing is one of our grand finales is a tour of the Assapequa Creek in September. We don't have a date yet, but everyone that is registered for our webinars and for our listening sessions will get an invite for that as well, which leads into Kendra having a panelist, right? A panel on the 24th of September?
Yes, we're looking to have a roundtable discussion with some of the elected and community leaders in Assunpink municipalities, with the goal to be to sit down and really start discussing some of these issues and trying to address them on a cross municipal level. Because if we could solve our flooding and stormwater and water quality issues working within our own municipality, we would already, but that's not how watershed dynamics work. So the part of it is having stories, testimonials from residents about what they're looking for and what they need and what they're expecting out of their elected officials.
Kendra, this is great work and it's necessary work. And so while we're not doing that function in our programming, we fully support Kendra in her programming.
You know, I don't mean to interrupt you, Aubrey, but I really think of this as a war with many, many fronts. So there's behind the scenes, there's up in front, and we can't all be at the same place doing the same thing, because these problems, these systemic large problems, did not occur because one entity was acting alone, or it's because many entities acted in such a way that local communities are overburdened, that we're having a disproportionate impact on people of color, on immigrant communities, on people where English is not their primary language. So it's going to take a mindful, many-pronged approach to take this, to tackle this issue. And we're just happy to be partners with you all for it.
Thank you so much. And before I'll ask Fred to speak on the Delaware River, I just would like to add that that's why it is so important for these listening sessions being hosted by Pastor Karen, because we are now bringing in the clergy, because they are dealing with the congregants, their spiritual health is also dependent upon their mental health. If you're in a good environment, in a clean environment, that impacts your mental health, which has positive impacts on your spiritual health, whatever it is that you, however it is that you worship and however your faith is. It definitely has positive impacts in that way. So Kendra, I'm going to ask that you take down Pastor Karen's information, and that if you can please include her in this conversation from a perspective of clergy, it would be greatly appreciated, because she definitely does work on all fronts within the city, and she would definitely have a very valuable input into that.
Absolutely. Honestly, I was going to get in touch with Pastor Karen just to ask where she got those rockin' sunglasses.
I know,
she's
always so fashionable. I love her.
She's just like, we're just going to be here like, oh,
I'm
steal the
showing them
show.
off. I just got them today.
That's so pretty. I love them. Fred, can you speak to the Delaware River?
Well, I would reinforce what Kendra just said. The issues are many, and it's we talk about the flooding and the water contamination in our ground and on our creeks. It's death by 1,000 cuts. It's many different sources, and so the solutions have to be equal. There has to be. It's not just non-point solution that's causing the problem. The solution is non-point solutions, and so it comes from. A lot of it comes from residents getting a little bit of information and making sure their elected officials understand that this is an important and powerful issue to them. Kendra mentioned she already did. She posted that the planning guide for municipalities. Another one that's very specific to Mercer County and Trenton is on the Mercer County website. It's the hazard mitigation plan, and they update it every 5 years. I believe they just updated it in 2020, maybe 2021, but it has information in it specific to town. To talk, if you live on the Assunpink Creek in East Trenton, or if you live on the Myrie Run in Hamilton Township, Shabakunk Creek, it talks about specific land use issues that need to be changed, and like one on the Pond Run in Hamilton Township. is that they're recommending that Pond Run is already overdeveloped and with impervious surfaces. And if you want to see a change, they need to start taking up some of that impervious surfaces, parking lots and that sort of thing. 10% of the volume of the impervious surface in the Pond Run should be removed before you'll start seeing an improvement in local flooding. So getting the plan that oh, and thanks Kendra. Yeah, and those are, you don't have to be a planner or an engineer to understand what they're saying there. And going to your planning board or going to your elected officials and sharing some of these thoughts and ideas to them can make a difference. You know, not all the planning board members or all the elected officials are going to come and give you a big embrace and say, thank you for bringing climate change information, but some of them will. And before you know it, there's going to be conversation when the next developer comes in. And we've seen that in stormwater management in other communities too, where now the planning boards are saying, well, wait a minute, what about the flooding downstream? They're starting to talk about it. And that came from a member of the public getting a little bit of information and going in and asking questions and making sure that the elected officials and the appointed officials on the planning board are more aware that these are important issues. So that's part of the solution.
Fred, I thank you for that. And again, you mentioned in the comments that, you know, water doesn't know any boundaries. The water doesn't care about government boundaries, right? And I remember when we had Hurricane Sandy, and that flooded New York, it flooded New Jersey. I mean, it really created havoc. And then we had this last hurricane, was it Ida, that a lot of people died in their basements. And, you know, just the flooding, the impact, even in the surrounding area. I think even Lambertville even got hit with some of that impacts, right? So when we think about people in position, at the end of the day, we're all people, and we will, if this affects us, you know, if it affects the common folks, trust and believe it affects them as well, right? Because our local leaders live in the communities, right, that they serve in. And so it would be wise for all of us to get on the same page so that we know what's happening environmentally, and work together to make sure that we're all accountable, from the resident, from the homeowner, especially, to make sure that we're not allowing contaminants or the leaves or garbage to go into our stormwater drains when we're cleaning up in front of our properties, or just reporting when cleanup hasn't been done on our streets. Those of us that maybe don't feel comfortable advocating on the forefront, like Kendra mentions, there's so many different points that you can pitch in from. Maybe you're great at letter writing. Maybe you're great at standing up in front of the council people and speaking up for your group, right? I think these are the moments that we really need to see where we fit in, what are our skills, and help, you know, get those things accomplished. Pastor Karen, do you have anything that you would like to add to this?
I think the strategy is very wise because dealing with the problem through different fronts and tapping into the different gifts that people have, especially people of color. I think you guys are onto something here. And I'm glad that next week you're intentionally being bilingual. Yes. Because I mean, one of the only ways we really can reach out to the growing immigrant community that happens to speak Spanish. I know we also need to reach out to the Haitians, and so Creole, etc. But I think the strategy is, how do we bring those who have often not have a voice to have a voice, but more than a voice, to actually have a way to themselves help correct the problem. So I'm excited about the potential, the groundswell, as they say, that we can generate by having these small group
Yeah.
listening and getting the feedback. So I don't know if Sun Young, she's one of my wonderful member leaders. She's amazing. She's a national leader, actually. She asked a couple of questions that you asked. You've read her chat when she wasn't on. She's back on. I don't know if she has anything to say.
We'd love to hear from you, Sun Young. She said, I heard everything.
Okay.
This is wonderful. So yes, next week on the 25th, our group and our focus will be bilingual and Spanish, because we are one of the fastest growing demographic populations in, I want to say, the world, but especially in our urban communities. And we cannot do any of the work without including our brothers and sisters that are here, from the Latino population, because they work and they live and they serve in our communities and they worship in our community, and they're very much invested in the community. But when they don't have the information that's accessible to them in a way that they can understand it, then they feel like they are left out. And we never, ever want to feel or make anyone feel like they're left out of the conversation. Listening sessions go deeper, I think, than just being heard and having a complaint, brought to your attention. You have to really listen deeply to what the people are saying and really come together, like Pastor Karen just mentioned, come together with all of your gifts and all of your talents to bring to the table, because everyone is so important in this environmental justice movement. And this is the only way that we're going to be able to survive all of the rapid changes that are happening around us. We need to have practical sources, practical practices that we can lean upon, in these moments when these floodings occur, when the rains, when you know that there is going to be a hurricane and everything. What do you need to do to prepare for that? And it's not just, being just having like your food or shelter, like, is the waterways around your area, the stormwater basins around your area clean? Like, you make the difference in your community. You don't want to wait until, and this is our problem, I'm just gonna speak truth to power. This is our problem. Oftentimes we wait until something happens, right? Can I get an amen? We wait till something happens before we go ahead and then want to make a change. Now the thing happened. Now we're always dealing with catastrophe. We really need to be more proactive and look at what's happening around us so that when we get hit, we're not impacted so greatly. And if we are impacted, we know how to help one another in the process. A lot of times people are not looking to help one another when we're dealing with a catastrophe, and it needs to be proactive. Everything we do has to happen before the catastrophe happens. I got that song stuck in my head just now, the final countdown, like, I don't know, it just popped into my head. But that's how it feels like when you're, you know that there's going to be a storm and everything. Sometimes people are like, oh, it's going to be a storm, it's going to be all right, it's just going to pass. But then you're like contacting the insurance company, your car is underwater, things are really, really bad, and we're not trying to make light of the situation, but we have to be better at this, and I think these listening sessions help us to do that. We are almost at the end, guys. So I would like to hear from Peter. Peter, do you have anything that you would like to say? Peter, Patricia? Do you need help getting unmuted, or would you like to write it in the chat and then I can speak to it? Oh, Patricia said, just to thank you for a great session. Thank you, Patricia. And I noticed that my supervisor and one of our executive directors from Clean Water Action, Ms. Kim Gaddy, is on with us. So Kim, do you have anything that you would like to add to this conversation? Is she there? Thank you, Peter. It's been a great session. She said, nope, we're good. Thanks, Kim. Yes. Kendra said, happy to have you. Never forget the power of your own voice. That's right, Kendra. Absolutely. Kendra, you had asked us a question in the beginning, and I'm scrolling. She asked, do you have a story about the rainfall during the storm, and did it impact your life? I don't know if people got to read that. Does anyone have a story about the rainfall during the storm and did it and how it impacted your life? No. So this didn't directly happen to me, but in full disclosure, full-time I work for the county. And so while I was at work one day, this woman came in and she had to get a document notarized for her insurance company, because during the last bad hurricane, that was Ida, right? Her car went underwater. And the problem with that was she could not get her car, like a new car, because of the pandemic and it not being able to get over to her. So she was like greatly impacted by this, right? And then I remember when this happened, I was moving from Trenton into Hamilton. And what would have normally taken me 15 to 20 minutes to get to my new home, it took me close to 2 hours. And my son was ahead of me and I kept losing him, right? So I was frustrated, I was tired, but I got scared because I said, I'm driving around in circles, right? Because all you see are these barricades and these caution signs, and you're trying to figure out, am I ever going to get home? And then you see people with their cars parked on the side and they cannot get home. And it was just a very frightening experience, you know? And so I never, ever want to have to experience that again. So looking at the areas that are flooding, I'm like, God, how is it that we can make sure that we don't have those issues happen to us again? And how do we partner with the city of Trenton? Because I don't think that they are not doing their job. I don't want to say that, right? But we also don't know what the backstory is and why these areas continue to flood. And why is it in our communities of color?
And I want to say also, by raising our voice, we'd be helping the actors within the Trenton government that are trying to do more about this. That oftentimes, if there's not enough noise, people within organizations can say, well, obviously it's not a concern. So we have to acknowledge that there are great great advocates for the overburdened communities in Trenton in its own government. That was a wibbly sentence, but I think I got there. But there are advocates there, but part of supporting them is raising a voice and talking about these issues so that they're stronger to go to their superiors about it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kendra. Pastor Karen, did you want to add to that? You're on mute.
I just realized I was muted. So you wanted to hear a story, Kendra. My brother's family were affected by Hurricane Sandy. This was in Staten Island, and the surge that came moved the right side of his entire house. So he almost lost his home. And had to, with the help of his son, stabilize his home because it would have fallen over.
Yeah.
And he is a retired firefighter, and he thought he could, like, deal with it. And when the water was past the first floor up to half of the second floor, and he saw his SUV floating away, he said, "What the heck did I do?"
Oh my God.
So he was one of the fortunates that got, the insurance money to fix his home, etc. And it's beautiful again. But, I think that's one of the issues that often our people of color are not insured well enough, so that when these situations happen, what they lose, cars, etc., they're often not able to replace them or to repair them.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great point. Not everybody has, like in our communities, right? Not everybody has that backup money. Moving into Hamilton, I thank God that the woman before me, she put work in the basement. And she made sure that we had a French drain, and she also moved out the lead piping and put copper piping in. Those are two areas that I clearly would not have been able to fund on my own immediately, And Soon Young says regular homeowners insurance doesn't cover floods, but more houses are flooding even if they're not in FEMA designated flood zones. I want to see if Kathleen would like to speak to something to that, if she has anything, and then Fred.
No, I don't really have much to add about that. I will say I know that EPA currently within our region, we're working on different climate adaptation and mitigation plans. So really trying to figure out what the vulnerabilities are that, our communities within New Jersey and New York and our territories are facing. And so there's definitely, that money coming down the pike, federal funding that's going to be kind of, put into a lot of this climate change stuff. And I will just echo a lot of the sentiments, raising your voice and making your local, state, and federal government representatives aware of these things. It really does help us kind of elevate, hey, this is a concern of our community members that we need to work on.
Thank you, Kathleen. Soon Young goes on to say, so how do we get insurance to cover? Our folks can't afford regular insurance and pay for flood insurance as well. People are barely paying rent or mortgage. If you're a renter and your rental floods, where do you go? I don't have an answer to that, but with a little bit of research, maybe we could find out, and then we'll get back to you on that, Soon Young. So thank you for that, because that is a good question.
I
Yeah.
want to chime in. I'm talking completely out of my armpit. I don't know that they do this, but I know within Trenton, the Isles, the organization, does many things with residents about home ownership. I think they focus more on financing and equity, but insurance is a factor in this. So they can be an excellent resource as well.
Thank you, Kendra, for that. So we'll tap into that. Fred, do you have anything that you would like to add to this?
I would just add that while many while many communities and many entities are working to try and become more resilient to the impacts of climate change, we want to ask for the details of what that means, because in some community, in some of the ideas are old ideas that we already know don't work, like building a berm, just a raised level of ground in order to keep one neighborhood from flooding may benefit that one neighbor, but it's only pushing those floodwaters to somebody else's community downstream. So as our politicians and our planners and our government is talking about building resiliency, we want to make sure we understand, because if they're building a berm that's protecting your neighborhood, and that's a great thing, but maybe there's another neighborhood upstream who's building a bigger berm, and that's sending stormwater down to you. So that's the one thing that we want to look at, that not all resiliency it doesn't always mean the good things. We need to get more of that stormwater back into the ground where it falls to recreate the natural hydrologic cycle. So we're talking about green stormwater infrastructure and rain gardens and many, many, many other things like that. But we want to reduce the volume of runoff and increase the volume of infiltration in our stormwater. And that's, those are two big parts of the solution.
Thank you, Fred, for that. And that leads us into segueing into another webinar that we're going to have in June about green infrastructure. So we will definitely send that information out to all of the participants that have already attended our webinars, all of our contacts, and those that are on the listening sessions as well. Sun Young says, permaculture water practices become common policy, ? Most developments don't plant plants that are water seepers. I think development and building landscape policy has to change. I agree with you. Kendra, do you want to speak to that?
I was actually going to comment on the earlier comment about more houses are flooding, even if they're not in FEMA designated flood zones. So these issues are becoming more localized as development is increasing in our state. So when, a new shopping plaza or Amazon warehouse is built, suddenly you have a whole large surface where stormwater can't trickle down into the soil and has to flood has to flow somewhere else. And that turns into a flood in somebody's yard, school, what have you. So it's not possible for FEMA to have this detail and to know about all these changes. So that can't always be a predictor about where you're going to flood. I was just telling my husband, as we're looking to buy houses, not right now because it's insane, but concerned about living in a flood zone. And he's just like, well, we'll just have to pick it well. I'm like, someone could build right next to you and change it. So that's another thing that's occurring. And in post-pandemic, well, not post-pandemic, sorry, because we're still in it, but trying to get out of this pandemic, there's a lot of talks about like, oh, let's push jobs, let's increase that. And of course we need that for people, but we have to balance this building development and doing these things with the environmental impact, because it's always going to have our personal impact.
I agree. And I would suggest in the looking for a home that you do Oprah request and find out what else is going on in your neighborhood, because with all of the 20-something years of knowledge in government and public works, I did not do my Oprah request, and I live in between a hoarder and someone with the stagnant pool. And it's not only unsightly, but the county has identified mosquitoes with West Nile disease. So, right. And people complained about this, and it was brought up to the housing and the health and everybody, and, just all along the stream. And I did not know this in advance. So I really suggest that you look at other areas that are, people are not thinking about buying a house and thinking about mosquitoes, right?
Yeah. No,
You're not thinking about that. But for whatever reason, the township of Hamilton has a really bad mosquito problem.
Yes, it does. Yeah,
I don't know
talk about
why.
this offline. I've
Yes.
discovered that, and it's barely like summer.
It's the craziest thing because I lived in the hood and I didn't have that problem. So I don't understand. I don't understand. But we'll talk about that offline. But these are just some of the things that you want to look at when you're purchasing a home. Get your Oprah request. And if you don't know how to do it, Fred and I have done a webinar about it, right? And we can educate you on how to get your Oprah request.
No, I was in on that webinar. It's very good. And I was thinking like, I need this when I go shopping for a house. This is it.
Exactly. I'm telling you.
In the chat, someone's actually asking about that. So maybe one of you wants to explain more what that is and what's it's designed to do.
Right. I'm going to ask that you do that, please.
Sure. What was the specific question?
Oprah. Explain Oprah.
Oh, okay. So Oprah is the Open Public Records Act. It's a state regulation that enables everyone, every citizen, to be able to access a lot of the government records that impact, that can impact ours, like development permits, contaminated sites, cleanup plans, and how a particular site is being cleaned up, and what's the timeline and things like that. We offered a training on how you go to New Jersey DEP. They have an Oprah page, Open Public Records Act, and it allows you, if you watch the webinar, it gives you a step-by-step how Aubrey could have gone and looked at her address, the block and lot and her address. She could have done it to the Hamilton Township Public Health Department, or if that may not be, the health department. And she could have gotten an Oprah request asking, can you provide any information on public health issues in this community in Hamilton Township? And it would just provide you that kind of information that then you can act on it.
Thank you for that, Fred. If you would like, if you're interested in seeing that webinar, let us know in the chat and I could send it to you, because there's a link to the YouTube channel and you could see it there. It's a lot of information, but it's very useful information. And that's just one step in arming yourself with being educated on what's going on in your neighborhood and how to find out that information. The city takes about they have to process your request in about 7 days, give you some kind of response, and then they'll make sure that you get the information. I had my brother-in-law do it for me, and there was like over 20 complaints that I saw, and I was horrified. But I feel like I was kind of called to this area so that I could bring about some kind of changes, because as a woman of color, it wasn't on either side, it wasn't very much accepted. So I am just coming to terms that part of my calling is not just environmental justice, but advocacy for people of color. And so it's like, the work finds you. You don't go out looking for it, right, Kendra? Right, Pastor Karen? Like we get caught up in it, and you're like, I'm not even looking for this, but it finds you, right? So, look, power to the people, and we're gonna get the information that we need so that we can help not just ourselves, but the people around us. Any final thoughts before we close out? I really enjoyed this session. So I want to again thank each one of you for being here with me in this, and with Fred and with Pastor Karen. Thank you, Kendra, for showing up and for lending your expertise. I'm always so very proud of young women, especially young women of color, when they get into this work, because it's not what we were raised to do, right? It's like, be the doctor, the lawyer, the this,
No, but we're raising our girls to do it now.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I don't have daughters, but I am an auntie. So, so Titi has got her hands in the mix and trying to bring about awareness. So I'm really excited about that. Any final thoughts, Fred?
I would just say that I thank the members of the public that joined us. You know, knowledge is power, and you're not going to get an Encyclopedia Britannica jammed into your head in one session. So hopefully you walk away with just a little bit more information that you can stick into your own personal toolbox that makes you just a little bit better of an advocate, have a little bit stronger voice. And so I appreciate everybody that's come on here, not only our experts and guests, but our experts and guests. That's all there is.
And Fred, I just want to thank you because this is a forging of expertise and knowledge between you and I, and working together and learning about different cultural competencies. And we're growing our own tool chest working with one another. And so I'm very grateful for that opportunity. And opening up and being able to open up and share with Kendra, with Pastor Karen, with the community, that's a blessing, you know, to be
Yep.
able to not only listen, but to also be heard as well. So that's important, right? Kendra, do you want to say, would you like to add anything before we close out?
I'm so sorry. I started to have a brainstorm idea and had to
I
write
love
it
it.
down.
I'm sorry I interrupted it.
No,
I'll get
because I
back
was
to
just
you
like,
if you
oh, I
want.
should do that. So I just want to say I enjoy collaborating with everyone, and I hope I'm going to drop my email in the chat again. But I want to say you should always feel free to reach out to me, to Fred, to Aubrey, because we're here to listen to you. And we know that it's 7:30 on a Wednesday night. It might not come to you now, but in a month we might have another thunderstorm. Tomorrow it might start hailing or something where you have more feelings about this or something occurs to you. So please reach out. The work is always being done on this, and we could always use more voices.
Thank you so much, Kendra. Pastor Karen, would you like to add something? Okay, I think she's in transit.
I think she went to her celebration with
Yeah,
her friend. Yeah.
thank you, Fred. Kim, would you like to say something before we close out? Oh, Kendra put her, everybody check your chat. Kendra put her information in there. Fred, if you could put your information in there as well. So in the words of, who is this, Russell Simmons? Kendra? Thank you for coming out and good night.
Is that Russell Simmons? That was new to me.
I'm dating myself. He would have this comedy show, and then at the end, Kim raised her hand. Kim, are you able to speak? Where she says, I cannot connect, only through the chat. Okay, thank you. I'm dating myself. Russell Simmons would, at the end of the show, would say, thank you for coming out and good night, and then drop the mic and go.
Yeah,
Everyone, any final thoughts? Put it in the chat. If not, we want to thank you for your time. We want to thank you for your active participation, because that was very important. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Patricia. Yeah, we enjoyed you guys. And I saved the chat. So who else do we have here? Thank you, Peter. He said it was great. Bye. Bye to everyone, okay? Have a good night. Enjoy dinner and get some rest. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Have a good one all.
Bye-bye.